So for this particular series that I'm doing, God's Plan is Better Than My Plan, we've had some very diverse readings. We really have. We started out a couple of weeks ago where Jesus basically said, if it's your hand that causes you to sin, cut it off. If it's your eye that causes you to sin, pluck it out. That was a really good start, wasn't it? Like we all have to be maiming ourselves to get into heaven. Obviously speaking in that more figurative kind of way. Then the whole thing on marriage, and we heard a lot about how God created them, Adam and Eve, and reminding ourselves that the one thing in God's plan that wasn't forfeited by original sin was marriage. That models our relationship with God. And then, of course, we had, last week, and that was a very interesting set of readings for us as well, because it reminded us that we really need to put God in the right place in our lives. But this week we get to it, and it almost had a little bit of a Lenten kind of a feel to it. That first reading especially is a very common Lenten reading. I crushed him in infirmity. He didn't shield himself, the suffering servant in Isaiah. And now we get to this gospel. What is wrong with James and John? I mean, a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, Jesus put the child in their midst and said, we're not looking for greatness in this life. And now they come up, well, can we sit on your right and your left then? Are they just that thick? Are they that? It gives me hope because sometimes I can be a little thick myself, but that's beside the point. It's interesting. I remember when I was first ordained and I got to my first assignment and the pastor asked me to be the moderator for the confirmation program. So I said, okay, sure. We had a school and we had religious education and we had a lot of kids in the program. And so I was talking with the people who were doing the principal and the religious ed director about what their expectations were, and I was to give a presentation on the first night. And one of the expectations that was in there was the expectation that they would do some service. It's a fairly common thing in most religious education programs where they ask the kids to do 10 hours of service. So I'm all geared up and I give the whole speech. And at the end of that night, we had all these kids signing up to be altar servers and they wanted to be in the youth choir and they were going to do this and they were going to do that. And that was really great. And then about 6 or 7 weeks later, I didn't see any of them. And at the end of the year, they all wanted me to sign this form that they did their 10 hours. And as a newly ordained priest, I was kind of like, oh man, really? That you did your 10 hours and you just left? You didn't finish the year? So I started to change it. Like after the first 2 years of doing it there, I started to change it and I said, listen, we're not going to put a time limit on it. We're not going to do anything like that. What I'm going to say is, if you truly believe in Jesus Christ, you should already be serving him in some capacity. And what I want you to do is to write down what that capacity is so that you get credit for it this year. Well, a lot of them didn't have ongoing service. They didn't really actually give themselves in service. See, this is something I've noticed a lot with young people nowadays, especially. Like young people who want to get into a good college will go on a service trip to some foreign country and help build houses, or go down to a Habitat for Humanities. They'll do these things and they'll just do it so that they can put it on their resume, but it never actually came from their heart. It never actually was a thing that they understood should be something that I'm giving because it's right to give. I'm doing this because it's right to do. I know a lot of people who do some very wonderful things that you'd never know. You'd never meet them. But those things are getting done. They always say in a parish, you don't know that something was getting done until that person passes on and it stops getting done. But think of it this way. All of us should be giving, and giving to a sacrificial level. There was a young man in my previous parish. I found out that he actually played in a band. And so I was talking with him one afternoon and I said, hey, listen, I hear you're a talented musician. Why don't you join one of our choirs? He goes, I don't give it away. That's the kind of attitude that's out there, my dear brothers and sisters. There are a lot of people today that want to just show up for Sunday, do their thing, and go off. And that's not God's plan. That is not in God's plan. Jesus was the suffering servant from the first reading, and today he confirms that he came to serve. Now, you all know as well as I do, to serve others is not fun. It's not always easy. It can actually sometimes be difficult. But we were called to serve others. And so, think about it for a second. What service do you render to God? What do you give to God? What do you offer to Him as part of His plan as we're working out our salvation with Him, of being connected with Him to make sure that all the things that need to get done are getting done? You don't know how many times someone in the parish will walk up to me. They have a great idea of something they want to see done. Oh, Father, this is a really great idea. All right, so organize it. Oh, no, Father, I was expecting you to do it. I'm one person. I need an army to mobilize to get out there and to get things done. My dear brothers and sisters, we really have to honestly pray about this ourselves. Matthew Kelly, he's a great author, and I hope you follow some of his stuff. But Matthew Kelly was thinking about this very kind of a thing. And he said, when it comes to tithing or giving to the church, or when it comes to serving in the church, he wondered, he says, there's a principle in businesses that many big businesses get 80% of their revenue from 20% of their customers. He said maybe something like that's true in the church, because it seems like, we always, struggle to have enough money, or we always struggle to have volunteers to get things done. So he went and actually did a survey, and he did a study in several different parishes, and he found out that it wasn't an 80-20 split. He found out that it was a 93-7 split. 93% of the income in the parish came from 7% of the parishioners. 93% of the volunteer work that was done by 7% of the parishioners. Now, of course, that's not true here, right? We have 100% doing 100%. But for those of you who are not, maybe it's time to pray about that a little bit. He'll go on to say, could you imagine if we could just bump that 1%? That now 8% were giving more money. 8% were volunteering. How much more could get done? Get it to 9%. That would be wonderful. A couple of weeks ago, we had put a thing in the bulletin listing a lot of ways that people could get involved, and much to my surprise, almost nobody signed up. I guess you're all very busy or have a lot of commitments or whatever, and I can appreciate that. But I really would ask, service and giving are so important. It's such an integral part of God's plan, because the good things of God are going to be shining forth from us. We're doing the work of God. And what's the work of God? The salvation of souls. And how do we do our part in it? Well, everybody's different. You know what you're good at. I know what I'm good at. Whatever you're good at, that's what you should be trying to do. How can you parlay that for God? That service aspect of it, of being a servant, requires some effort. I admit it. It requires giving up something maybe you wanted to do yourself, but now can't do it. I've asked people in the past, could you help us out on this Tuesday night for this event? Oh no, that's when my favorite show is on. Come on, folks, give it up for 1 week. These are the kinds of things that Jesus is trying to get across to his disciples. We're not working for this world, we're working for God. We're not working to try to make our own lives easier, we're working to try to make other people's lives easier. And there's so many ways that we can serve God. Not just here in liturgical ministries like the altar servers or the readers or the extraordinary ministers, but also we do a lot with people who help out with our weddings and our baptisms, people who join up with the Catholic Daughters, the Knights of Columbus, who are service-oriented organizations. So many good things that we can be doing, but it's going to require us to change our own schedules a little bit and to change our own budget a little bit so that we can be better in serving God. And so I encourage you, get Matthew Kelly's book, 4 Signs of a Dynamic Catholic. Very easy read. If you've never read Matthew Kelly, I'll tell you right now, he's probably one of the easiest reads in the Catholic world. Get a copy of that book if you haven't got it, and just spend some time reading it. And then when you're finished reading it, ask yourselves, well, what more could I be doing? How much more could I be giving? In what way could I make things better for my parish, for God, for my community? I know it's sometimes a sacrifice, but Jesus just made it clear we're supposed to be making a sacrifice for Him. He sacrificed Himself for us, so we need to sacrifice a little bit for Him. Imagine how much different this world would be, our community would be, if everybody just took 5 minutes of their time to serve God this week, and another 5 minutes next week, and another 5 minutes the week after. or took just a few more dollars this week and a few more dollars next week and a few more dollars the week after, how much more could be done for God with the gifts that He has given us? And so God's plan is way better than my plan. I've learned it the hard way in my own life, and I now hand it on to you. God's plan is better. Get to know His plan a little bit more acutely, and you'll be surprised at how many ways you could start to turn yourself completely over to Him and become His servant and a servant of your brothers and sisters here in Christ. God bless you.